Communication at its best. Next slide. Communication these days and times have become more important than ever, especially with the internet and friendship based on keyboards, a mouse, and a computer screen. There are several ways to communicate thanks to technology, but the simplest way to communicate is vocal. How communication with one another and listen to conversations going on around us says a lot about our character and who we are at the same time. A simple conversation with someone we meet for the first time or even our loved ones can define the outcome of our relationship. Next slide. My overreaching goal is to be able to communicate in an environment from social to work to family. Communication is labeled as continuous, complex, collaborative process of verbal and nonverbal mean making. This is something that I have not mastered. I can speak in terms of the military, but in the civilian world, I might as well be speaking a foreign language at times. I'm used to being listened to at all times. I've been a leader for 19 years, and I have a difficult time starting from the bottom of the letter and having to be heard. Next slide. Communication on a civilian level is something that I have to get used to. And in the military, you have your own language that we speak, and I have found that this makes communicating with civilians difficult at times. 6 fixtures of communication I find myself working on now is meaning, choice, culture, identity, conversation, and nexting. Stewart stated communication consists mainly of getting your point across, which is something that I want to master in the upcoming months. I would also like to see myself able to master 2 levels of communication, sharing information and connecting with others. Next slide. In the past 23 years, I've spent in a society that speaks in its own language. We use phrases and acronyms that are not suitable for the civilian world. I have been a leader for so long that I did not want to be questioned. I just want my orders followed without question or conversation. My attitude and behavior has always been aggressive. There was nothing subtle in my conversation with my soldiers. I gave an order, and if the order was not followed, you suffer the consequences. What I've learned from my friends is this kind of behavior is not tolerated in the civilian world. That already lets me know that my style of leadership will not be accepted with open arms. I will come across looking overbearing, controlling in an environment where that is not welcome. Next slide. My behavior from the outgoing troublemaker changed the day that I got married. With a wife and 2 kids to support, I had to take a lot of my mischievous behavior and focus more on my family needs before my own. I have matured since I started this class, and I found there are a lot of things missing in my conversation with my leaders, friends, and subordinates. Once you pass 20 years of service, your level of listening diminishes. You figure you have the answers to everything, and if it's not done my way, we're just not going to do it at all. In the military, your level of communication falls under the norms. We use languages that's hard to change for the civilian world. There are changes that can hurt us because, as Patterson points out, unfortunately, many of us learn methods that do not work well. Next slide. I am able to hold a conversation naturally anyway. I love to talk, but I have a huge problem with talking too fast. I have to repeat myself. I also talk really soft, and after years of hearing loud explosions, I don't hear very well either. This causes breaks in conversation and for my wife to have to translate what I said to other people, which is very embarrassing. The positives from this class for me is I stopped speaking so much and I spend more time listening. This also has caused a change in my family dynamics. After I spoke to my wife, we now allow our kids, after a difficult situation has happened, to come to us later and talk about the situation that happened. Next slide. The flat blank theory is one that most reminds me of myself. From time to time, when I'm angered, I can't hear well, see accurate, think straight, or act sensibly. I tend to get upset at a moment without thinking it through. I now know that listening is an important factor in communication, but I just can't do that when I'm upset. To overcome this, I have to harness that anger and walk away. When I can't just walk away from the situation, I have learned to take a moment to get my head straight and just listen to the conversation without interruption. I have also learned that being angry about a situation at the time will not do anything to help the situation move along. I also realized that the flat brain states there's always the potential for me to say something in anger and try to repair the damage by saying I didn't mean what I said in anger. Next slide. If I feel negative thoughts, I just don't need to respond at all. I bite my tongue a lot and just let it go. Instead of trying to forge ahead on a conversation that I know is already volatile, I bide my time and re-engage my partner. Now it's a calmer conversation with both parties actively listening with feedback and understanding at the end. My weakest talent is sitting still and listening. That combined with my consistently cutting people off causes problems. Now I just stop what I'm doing and I listen. I don't try to input my own spin on the story of the conversation as my conversation skills grows. We all know the guy who likes to input his story, telling the same story that you're telling. I'm that guy. I now know I just need to not interrupt and forget what I wanted to input, But at the same time, remember that the time belongs to the person telling the story and not me. Next slide. Winning arguments have always been my goal in my marriage. I want to be the victor. I lose more often than I win. I don't know if it stems from me being a combat soldier or just thinking that I'm right and I just want to get my point across. What I have learned is that there really are no winners or losers in an argument. What you have is just an argument. What I've taken away from Pettis is giving up on our defenses lets us hear the hurt and the caring hidden beneath someone else's anger. Then we can turn the destructive win-lose game into a come-alive cooperation. Treat arguments as a team sport is what I'm shooting for in my relationship. I also find myself not wanting to battle anymore. I found that if I can't get my opponent to stop along with me and think about what we're going on about, then there can be a win-win situation with everyone walking away feeling like they're like a winner. Next slide. Some of us struggle with internal pollution as we are focusing on the conversation at hand. You're almost having a conversation inside of your head while you're engaging someone else. You know, it's internal pollution that one goes through when the person that you are talking to constantly asks you to repeat yourself and they're standing right there in front of you. What works for me is to focus on the person or the crowd that I'm speaking with. I've had times when my mind is wandering to different tasks that I've had to do in the middle of a conversation. For this course, the one thing I've managed to pick up is to focus on the speaker. Undivided attention is important here. Making the speaker feel like they have your full attention is important. It also helps facilitate conversation for both the speaker and the listener and keep them on the same page. Next slide. There are times when someone comes to converse with you and you have a lot going on inside your head. We call this catching you at a bad time. You have to be able to ask the speaker to give you a moment to clear your head. This is letting the speaker know that you are not ready to engage at that very moment. It gives you a chance to clear your head, ready yourself to engage in another conversation for whatever they have in mind. This can also lead to level 1 empathetic listening at a level where listeners refrain from judging the talker and place themselves in the other's position, attempting to see things from him or her point of view. Next slide. With external pollution, you are dealing with a background noise and several different events taking place at the same time. This can be dealt with by being at the ideal distance from the speaker and keeping your focus on the speaker. Facing the speaker and looking the speaker in the eye helps to distract the external pollution that is happening to around you. Make sure the speaker has your full attention and there should be no problems. Next slide. My skills in communication are actually improving daily. I go out of my way to speak to those around me. I listen to my wife more. I give her empathetic listening where before I was just listening just to be listening. We have started family dinners again to catch up on everybody's day. Without it, everyone in the family is going 10 different directions. This includes eating at the counter and not sitting down. Next card. The hardest point of culminating all this family communication is my lack of time with my family from being in the military. I know firsthand that I missed a lot of my children's childhood, and sometimes that's hard to fix up, but I am putting forward effort. I also know that I have anger issues and I need to get through them. I sometimes wait too long to tell someone that I'm upset, and by the time I do, I am furious. I'm working through these issues with help. My biggest thing that I need to make happen in my life is to make myself seem more approachable. This will help stimulate more conversation and give my family the relationship they deserve with me. Next slide.